Anybody can think of a good idea, but very few can make that idea a reality. A Plague Tale: Innocence is a good idea that falls apart in execution. It has a promising world and engaging story, but it goes back on so much of what it establishes that it feels like developer Asobo Studio changed course midway through production.
Please wait, madam.
Taking place in medieval France, Plague Tale stars Amicia and Hugo de Rune, a brother and sister who are randomly attacked by a group of English inquisitors. Driven from their home, they go on an odyssey across a war-torn and plague-ridden country that's slowly tearing itself apart. All the while, a swarm of carnivorous, plague-carrying rats threaten to wipe out everyone unlucky enough to be caught in the dark. A Plague Tale hits a lot of the generic story beats of this kind of single-player game. From the older character lying to the younger character having some kind of mystical secret, these beats are so familiar that despite checking the boxes of the great games that inspired it, like God of War or The Last of Us, it doesn't do anything to define itself. This is disappointing because Plague Tale has a fantastic premise, but it never goes the extra mile to be truly gripping. It never gives me a reason to care about any of the characters aside from the brother and sister, so a lot of the would-be dramatic scenes are rendered completely dull. There are several character deaths that don't carry any weight because there isn't enough time to care about them. Despite hooking me in with lingering questions, most of them are sloppily answered with the game's disappointing conclusion. A Plague Tale is first and foremost a stealth game until suddenly, it isn't. Despite the early levels building up mechanics like the follow and stay put functions for Hugo and throwable tools to distract and disarm soldiers, most of the weapons are only used for specific situations, and they hardly come back later on in the game. There are several points throughout A Plague Tale where it suddenly shifts into a fast-paced action game, which clashes with the way the game controls. Plague Tale was clearly designed with slow and methodical stealth in mind, so when it switches into heart-pumping combat, it feels unnatural and translates horribly. A boss fight in the early game feels like such a sudden turn that I was surprised the game was moving this quickly into a straight-up fight. This is even more confusing when there's a boss fight later on that made me sneak around and attack an unaware enemy. The end result is an attempt at diversity that feels unfocused. Thankfully, the carnivorous rats provide a surprising level of tension. They force players to think about their equipment and how they want to use it to get past swarms and soldiers at the same time. In addition, this never feels like micromanaging, and using rats as a tool for getting past soldiers is extremely satisfying. Beyond just combat, there are levels dedicated solely to evading rats. These act as de facto puzzle levels meant to break up the stealth. Unfortunately, none of the puzzles are particularly challenging, so they feel more like filler. In addition, the rats become less of a threat in the final hours of the game, to the point where evading them is boiled down to a single button push. So most of their tension is thrown out the window. The only real constant throughout the experience is the game's stunning graphics. A Plague Tale is a beautiful game, with so much detail crammed in that every town, house, and room feels lived in and alive. So that makes the game's lifeless character animations all the more disappointing. Despite inhabiting a beautiful world, it doesn't feel like the characters' expressions were given the same amount of attention. There's a scene early on when Amicia and Hugo are escaping from the English Inquisition, and they say they're scared, but it's hard to tell because the characters' faces don't show us anything. It's disappointing that most of the characters are put on the back burner since Plague Tale puts so much emphasis on storytelling. The seeds of a big dramatic twist are planted early on, but even would-be shocking moments like that feel half-baked because of the bland character animations and a rushed conclusion. It sets up so much, only to deliver on so little. Unfortunately, that's the whole game in a nutshell. Good ideas that start out with a lot of promise, but are fumbled in the game's final hours. I hope that Asobo Studio gets another shot at building this world, because with a little more focus, A Plague Tale could have been an engaging single-player experience. Instead, it's a by-the-numbers stealth game that abandons most of its mechanics and leaves players with a long list of could-have-beens. But hey, at least you can pet the dog. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this review. Every view counts, so I really appreciate it. Feel free to like this video if you enjoyed this review, and leave a comment with your thoughts if you played the game. If you want to see more from me, feel free to subscribe. And of course, I'll see you all eventually.